So we're joined today by Chris Summers, the Labour candidate for Uxbridge and South Ruislip. Thanks for coming down. If you just want to start off by telling us a little bit about your background, where you're from, your political awakening, as they brand it, how did that come about?
I grew up on the south coast, born in Sussex, then moved to Bournemouth, so it was all very sort of leafy, conservative heartlands. But my sort of political awakening was probably in 1984-5 when the miners' strike happened, and also then became a Labour councillor in 2010 and got selected earlier this year for Uxbridge and South Ruislip.
It's going to be the buzzword Boris Johnson. There's a kind of perception that he's entering the fray in West London, but is very much separated. He has no experience here, doesn't live here.
I think there is a perception that he picked a sort of convenient seat, which was, seen as a safe Conservative seat. And I don't think, if he were to be elected as MP, I don't think he would really be working that hard. I think he would already be moving on to, ministerial or, Prime Minister or whatever his ultimate ambition is. And I think people of Uxbridge and South Ruislip deserve more than that.
How does it feel to be an opposition candidate in such a kind of stronghold as Uxbridge and South Ruislip is for the Tory party?
Well, I've had quite a lot of changing emotions, since January, February when I was selected. At the time I was up against, Sir John Randall, who's a massively respected MP who'd built up this 11,000 majority over the years, and it did feel like sort of mission impossible, but I'd give it a good go sort of thing. But obviously the dynamic has changed quite a bit. Him stepping down, I'm no longer up against the incumbent. I'm up against Boris Johnson. Obviously he's got a big media profile, but I think there's a lot of people who are quite sceptical about whether he is the right person for this seat.
If we touch on your manifesto, what would you say are your most kind of prevalent or strong policies?
Sort of most focused on is housing. I think obviously there is a housing crisis in London and the UK in general, but especially in the London area. We had the Lyons review, which was commissioned by the Labour Party, and I got lots of really good recommendations for how we can help young people and people who are not on the property ladder, and how we can free up more land to be built on, not necessarily building on the green belt, but just freeing up land that is currently being sort of hoarded.
Kind of potential for a Conservative UKIP coalition. Do you think that that's a realistic prospect?
Yeah, I think that is quite possible. I mean, the Conservatives have been spinning it as telling their voters, if you vote for UKIP, you get Labour. I think there's a lot of Labour voters who need to be wary as well, that if you vote, there are some Labour voters who are attracted to going to UKIP. But I think if you vote UKIP, you will get a Tory government, and you may get a Tory UKIP coalition, but UKIP are far closer ideologically to the Conservatives than they are Labour. I mean, obviously they have Europe and immigration are their main issues, and Labour needs to do a lot more work on convincing people on both of those issues. We need to be telling people that there's 4 million jobs in this country that are very reliant on us being in the EU.
In the next couple of years, Britain will have to either align closer with the EU or bolster its special relationship with America.
Yeah, I think we're a bit too hung up on trying to be this sort of major world power on the same, on a par with the US or whatever. So equally, we can't allow the IS or ISIL or ISIS or whatever you call them to take over, a domino effect. So it's a very difficult one. I think I was in favour of the bombing, the airstrikes strategy, but I'd want to call it a day. I don't want British troops out there.
What about the growth of homegrown fundamentalists, young men and women here, becoming radicalised? How can you begin to counter something like that?
I think there's a sort of like a parallel strategy. On the one hand, I think our foreign policy needs to be. I mean, I would like us to be far less sort of friendly with Israel. I think I want a new Labour government to recognise the state of Palestine, and to be sort of pushing the Americans and the Israelis into coming up with a full-time permanent deal, because that is a sore that is constantly encouraging Islamic fundamentalists. And on the other hand, though, we need to be tough on Islamic extremists in this country, and also following, I think countries like Germany have got good policies of speaking to young Muslims as they're sort of growing up, and just keeping an eye out for people who are being radicalised.
Okay, let's bring it back to the local. One of the most kind of pertinent issues in Hillingdon is the HS2 expansion. The Tories are relatively inconsistent. Sir John Randall has been quite a vocal opponent of it, but Boris Johnson has commented before that he believes it's those opposing are NIMBYs.
I'm completely against it, and have been from the get-go. I'm a councillor in Northolt, which is on the HS2 route, and we've campaigned strongly against it. It's not worth the billions again that we're putting into it. I know it is currently Labour Party policy, but I'm hoping that that will be rethought. And considering like Hillingdon Hospital down the road needs £50 million to be sort of brought up to date, it's in a pretty terrible, pretty parlous state. I'd be much rather see money spent on hospitals and buildings like that.
Finish with you've got about 6-7 months till the election. Where does the campaign go from here?
Well, it's going to be a very pleasant winter, because I'm going to be out every weekend, every Saturday and Sunday, knocking on doors as it gets colder and darker. It was all about meeting people, finding out what their issues are, helping them, following things up.
Well, best of luck. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Okay, so we're joined today by Chris Summers, the MP, start again.
Oh,
Not quite the MP.
If only.
If only.